Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Arena 1989. So, in this review, I would say the thing that grabs me with this movie is just the interesting visuals. I would honestly call Arena like something of a future sport, or like one of those like if you want to say like Contest of Champions, stealing that from Thor Ragnarok. Like that's basically what this is in a nutshell, and it kind of focuses on that. Really, I love the fact that we are to have a normal human that is to otherwise try and take down these giant monstrous alienist creatures, and for good reason, because it's all about money. We have a guy named Steve Armstrong who is desperate to get back to Earth because this guy has just been stuck in on this spaceship for a fairly long time, and it seems like nothing is quite working out for him job wise. So he's just assessing, dude, it's either I'm going to get pushed back to go to Earth, or like eventually I should just head back there anyways. We we have Steve, who eventually is to be forced to eventually beat down one guy, to have eventually that guy being attached to some actual fight promoter. And so this fight promoter is like, like, who is this guy that beat you down? Because, like, this is one of my prized fighters. This is one of my best fighters. And now I have to figure out who this guy is because I want to seek him out. Because these people who are run by Quinn are really just running out of options in the fighter department. And when there is some kind of potential for a fighter out there, they have to go and seek it out. They're running out of options. And so we have in this film this all-out kind of future boxing kind of film. Like, yeah, they do use their like legs, like they do drop kicks at one point in this movie, or they do some kind of like submission kinds of moves that are to worry that someone's neck is going to get broken. But really, a lot of this is just like punching for the most point. Really going in this, I was just kind of like expecting very little from this film, and I kind of walked out of this film going like, wow, like this is kind of like, it's a simple movie, but I kind of just enjoyed it. Like, it reminded me of those old-fashioned films that like had these very simple like concepts, but like of course the like you're rooting for the hero of the story. Also, like the kind of characters that are in this movie, a lot of people could probably know or have seen them from anything from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, or probably a Battlestar Galactica, or Babylon 5 or something like that. So a lot of people probably did take this movie and go somewhere with it. So a lot of these faces might be familiar to you, and some might not. But with that said, so yeah, this is just a future boxing movie where we are to now have the fate of the human race resting on a guy named Steve Armstrong to take out all of these aliens to eventually win the arena. Very like, it's kind of interesting also how they start to kind of like set some characters up into this film, especially when we get to the musician who is to woo over Steve in this part of this movie. And we eventually realize that this singer, this Jade, is to eventually be more than what she seems to Steve. Eventually, it just seems that it's going to be a romantic entanglement. That eventually he is going to have a girlfriend at the end of all this. But eventually, that is going to push Steve to get egg on his face. So, really, the interesting part about this movie is the relationship between Steve Armstrong and Shorty. Shorty is a guy who has four arms onto his bate. He looks kind of like Frodo from Frodo or Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings, like with his kind of attire on most of the time. But he honestly just looks like that. But yeah, he is a guy with, of course, four arms. You can kind of see in some points of this movie where you can tell, like in some shots you can see the four arms, and then there are other shots when you can obviously tell that, like, we have like at a camera angle, like Shorty is just having his two arms out, and then his two other arms are off to the side. But then bizarrely, once we get close shot up, we have four arms going simultaneously. Kind of, I guess, kind of just showing us it's like, well, yeah, like some of these shots were really hard to do, and plus also I'm sure they had to do these shots in a certain kind of way, which I thought was like kind of like, hey man, like they're trying a bunch of things in this movie, and not everything is going to look 100% the greatest, but man, is this movie interesting. We also have this kind of like space age, like future kind of like casino like layout in this movie also, because eventually Steve eventually has to gamble to try to make more out of his money, but that leads him into hot water somewhere in this film. So with that said, I think it's about that time to go into this movie and go into spoilers. I could just say that this is just a simple feature boxing movie, but really, I just like I just feel like I just really enjoy this movie because of its one of a kind like approach. If anything, if people are questioning where exactly to see this film, go on to Tubi, Tubi. It's a free movie and TV service that at the end of the day, you could say that you've seen any number of things for absolutely free, where Arena is actually on Tubi. Evidently, on IMDb and Google, they call this Arena 1989, but I think Tubi calls it 1991 Arena. So, like, people might be confused by, like, well, is this the correct thing? Like, I'm going by the Google year rather than the actual Tubi year. So more than likely, Google might be correct and Tubi may be wrong. I don't know. But with that said, if you're going on Tubi, Tubi, go ahead and check this movie out finally for absolutely free. So, let's get into spoilers about this film, because it's honestly fairly simple. So, let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So, in the very beginning of this film, we are to showcase that both Steve Armstrong and Shorty are cooks and are chefs near the arena. They are to be chefs to, I guess, try to get a bunch of food off to everybody who is just kind of like, hey man, like hurry up, I want to get my food so I'm going to go back to the fight. So we have Steve, who is, of course, way too focused on the arena fight, and he is messing up every single one of the menus, or messing up every single one of the orders that are on the menu that Steve has to go out and give to Shorty. Eventually, we have one person who is to dislike one of his orders and ends up getting angry at Shorty, ends up kind of grabbing him. And so we have, of course, Steve, who stops whatever he's doing to come to Shorty's defense. And eventually we have, I guess, a family member of these two smaller creatures. We have a bigger guy who is named Fang. We have both Steve and Fang fighting it out in this food court like area leading to eventually Steve crashing Fang through a window and eventually just beating him. Uh, so we have both Shorty and Sam hearing over the intercom of this food court that both of them have immediately lost their jobs, and so they are to go and figure out how to get work now. We have Sam and Shorty who are trying to make their way back into like through the rung of this spaceship, and so Sam is to eventually find out that the key card that he has no longer works, and that he had missed out on depositing money for Sam to keep his key card. So we have Sam, who is basically homeless with nowhere to live. So we have Shorty who's like, hey man, you've basically like saved my life. So you know what? Like, I'm gonna have you come with me and you can come to the place where I live. So we have Shorty living in some kind of underground like dwellings. And so Shorty and Sam go off into this one home of theirs, and we have Sam, who is to notice that a previous Earth human champion is actually down there as well. I guess he's just kind of like down on his luck. I guess after retiring of all those fights, I guess he's just kind of like living in squalor, I guess, sadly enough. But this guy is the champion of Earth, and I guess he is to hold a medallion to prove it. And so we have Steve Armstrong that is just kind of boasting about, or just so proud that, oh my god, like he had seen like Marcus, this champion of Earth. And so we have Shorty and we have Sam who go on into their home, and Shorty is setting Steve up. I think I might have said Sam at some point. We have Shorty and Steve being put into their home, and eventually Steve is to kind of hear there's some rumblings going on in this home already. And so we have this character who is named Skull that is to pop out. This like gigantic looking head guy that has all these like metal like pieces attached to his head. Like he's almost kind of like, if you guys know Guardians of the Galaxy, he kind of has that like that kind of like Nebula look, but in the back of his head, there's nothing that like really attaches further on into his head. Plus, he looks very like his head looks fairly large. But anyways, let's get to the point. So we have Skull, who is mentioning the reason why he wanted to come here was to ask Shorty to help him start to rig a lot of the arena matches. And Shorty's like, dude, I do not have any interest. Like, no. Like, and so Skull is like, well, hey, man, like, if anything, like, you're going to regret that, like, I'm going to make a ton of money and, like, and you're going to be crying. And so Shorty's like, yeah, whatever, go away. So we have Shorty taking Steve and try to like set him up to head to bed or whatever, so he can get a good night's rest. So we are to have Quinn, and we are to have her people be in a match with a fighter named Spinner. Spinner is to fight this character named Horn, and Horn is going to be the big bad guy in this movie. So we have guys like Rogor and guys like Weasel, who are consistently trying to help Horn win consistently. trying to give him shots of adrenaline, trying to get any number of things to try to get Horn to be able to perform well through these matches. And so we have Spinner that is is half lizard man, half robot. So, and we have of course Horn that looks very much like a ram or a bull or and plus he's like half robot as well. So there's like a huge number of visuals going on. Hopefully, if I keep the same thumbnail that I'm given, that I gave for this one, Horn is a very is on one side, and we have Steve who is on the other. But really, I don't like for how frequently that I've probably changed these thumbnails. More than likely, that might not stay a thing. But for safety's sake, more than likely, I will probably try to keep the same kind of picture out for I don't know how long. So, because this one will probably definitely need to eventually get improved of visual quality. Because this one looks a little fuzzy, but it is what it is. I couldn't only find certain pictures of this movie. It was very difficult. So, Arena. So, we have Horn eventually taking down Spinner. And so, we are to have, after this match, we have Spinner, who is so damaged that evidently he needs to get a part that is very expensive. And so Spinner is like, hey, don't retire me. Like, don't, come on. Like, I need the money. I need to, please don't retire me. And so Quinn is like, you know what? I think that we can come up with trying to figure out a way to keep Spinner with us. But they're eventually going to have Spinner kind of off to the side because they need to try and get another fighter. Like, Spinner cannot fight right now, so they need to get an alternate. So Fang is to come into Quinn's spot, Quinn's area. And we find out Fang is like broken arm. He's all like bandaged and all kinds of goofiness. And so Quinn is like, what the heck happened to you? And so we have Quinn who goes and takes her two guys that are kind of her left and right hand men. And she sends them out to find this Steve Armstrong. Here's the thing though. They have to go and beat him up to see how legit this guy really is. So we have Steve who is waking up and Shorty is mentioning, hey, I'll make you eggs, and so Steve, or I'll just call him Armstrong for the whole time, because I'm consistently getting the name confused. So we have Armstrong who's like, well, hey man, eggs are expensive. If anything, we haven't guaranteed that we're gonna get a job right away. And Shorty's like, hey, just kind of relax. Just if anything, just I have the eggs and we'll just make him. So we have Quinn's two men coming in to talk to Armstrong and to mention that they are seeking revenge for Fang, and Armstrong doesn't even know who that is. So we immediately have these two goons pushing Armstrong around to eventually have them just beating the living crap out of him at first. Just really going through and tossing him around. These guys are trading blows with this guy. But eventually, once we get further out of this home and out into a much more public area, within where kind of like Marcus is and a lot of the other kind of people are. Um, we start to see Armstrong start to pull this around, where eventually he is to, I guess, in a larger area, be able to actually take care of both of these guys, and so Quinn is to stop this fight, and Quinn is to mention like, well, for a human, like you fight really good after all. We have Steve, who had mentioned to Shorty while they're making their way to their home that Steve used to be a prize fighter when he was on Earth, and that I guess like once he came here, that like that didn't translate to becoming an arena fighter, because really I guess no one would trust a Earthling to come here and win. So, because everybody is so like unoptimistic about a human fighting in the arena, like it's really just kind of like if you guys ever seen the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, where Ryan Reynolds is a Earthling that is to be the Green Lantern, and all the other like Sinestro and Kilowog and all those characters are thinking like, a human be a Green Lantern? Like, are you sure that the ring chose correctly? Like, are you sure that like this guy is the right dude for the job? So, but then eventually he wins everybody over, and he's like, I guess Abensor's ring did choose correctly after all. But anyways, so we have Quinn, who is just kind of like, I don't know, but like at least he took down two men, and so Quinn is going to give Armstrong a shot. So Quinn is offering to have Steve fight for her, and Steve is very disinterested. He's like, you know what? Like when like I had every aspiration of coming here to fight in the arena when I first got here, but the more and more I realized when I actually got to see the arena in person that a lot of times it's a crock, like it's a cheat. It's like it's fixed, and I don't know if I want to be a part of your sideshow circus. Like I have no interest in doing this. So Armstrong has no interest in doing it, but he ends up getting forced into doing it anyways because movie slash script slash he has to. So we have Steve, who is to try to figure out how to get money together to head to Earth. And so Shorty comes up with a plan that, hey, like, with all the money that Steve has, let's go and blow that all at the casino and try to get some money for him uh, to get back to Earth. So plus also Shorty is still asking Armstrong, it's like, well, hey, like, how about you become a fighter? If anything, like with you being a fighter, like that's like what you've like aspired to be. But also, like, if we are to get enough money for you to head to Earth, like you can quit being a boxer at any time. If it gets too rough, you can walk away. So we have Shorty kind of like fusing that thought into Armstrong's mind. So they go out onto the casino, and so we have Armstrong, who is to like start looking at some of the games. He is to have one woman who is to tell him to kind of blow on her dice for her. And so she is to do really well at this casino, and so she is to call Steve her good luck charm. It seems that this girl is a famous singer of this world, and she is called Jade. And so we have this girl who is to be on some like jukebox, like future jukebox in one of these bars, and Armstrong is to ask Shorty like if he knows who this is, and Shorty's like, I have no clue. Like this stuff just gets piped in, and like whoever this is, no clue. So, but before that, back at the casino, so we have eventually like a riot being performed in this casino because someone is accused of cheating. And so we have Shorty who is to eventually just hugely grab a big stack of cash and get the F out of there because, like, if nobody's looking, just steal all kinds of cash and run off. And so we had these two run off to eventually be retrieved by this character named Weasel. And so this Weasel is to take both Shorty and Steve to Corrigan because they had wrongfully took that money, and they of course want to be paid back for it. So Steve is like, well, hey, like, fine, then I will give you my plane ticket back to Earth. And Corrigan is like, well, that's great and all, but you stole this amount, and like this plane ticket doesn't even cover that. And so Shorty's like, I sent some money back home to Nebula. That's why I like that's why it's not the same amount of money. And so we have Corrigan who's telling Steve, well, you need to come up with this money and you need to come up with it within 12 hours, or Shorty is going to be a little bit shorter, if you know what I mean. Shorty's going to start losing his fingers. So we have Steve immediately going to Quinn's home at like 3 in the morning. And so we have Steve who is kind of buzzing in Quinn's home, and Quinn is to ask like, what are you doing here at 3 in the morning? And Steve is like, I need your help. Like, do you still want to fight her? And Quinn is like, sure. So Quinn backs Steve the money. Steve goes off and gives the money to Corrigan, and Corrigan's like, wow, how did you come up with this money so quickly? And Steve is mentioning, well, it's a long story. So Corrigan is like, well, fine, like as long as it's your deal is done with me, I don't care. So we are to have Steve go to fight for Quinn. And so the very first actual fight we are to see Steve do is against a guy named Shamongo, or Shamambo, I think. Shamambo, it's a weird, goofy looking name, but it's also a very weird and goofy looking character. Everything after that just turns into a bunch of just fighting montages. He ends up fighting a ton of just interesting looking aliens, but like it comes into a massive amount of montages. Plus, I think it also kind of shows here and there horn fighting people in some parts. So we have Steve getting tips from Quinn, and Steve is telling Quinn, it's like, well, hey, you'll get your money's worth. Like, if anything, I will go and do the best I can. You'll get your money's worth. So we have Steve, who is fighting this almost like, how easy will it be to talk about this? So this creature kind of feels like a or kind of looks like a dinosaur to me. Like it has like a an almost worm-like body, but it has like two uh, like raptor-like hands, and it has these really like long legs that come out from it that are to look so like it looks very interesting, but it also looks fairly like goofy as well. Like you have to have Steve that not only has to try to fight like the body of this thing, but also has to be like also be aware of where this creature's legs are coming at him too, because this thing could probably knee him in the like in the head or in the like in the stomach or something. So we at some points in time have Steve trying to punch the guy's legs as well to just try to like get more at this creature's body. But we have plenty of time where this Shamambo character, if I'm even saying that right, eventually is to try and like grab onto like Steve and try to like hoist his neck up, and like to the point of Quinn and her managers worrying that Steve could maybe break his neck and maybe they have to call the fight. Steve eventually counters from that and consistently tries to like punch at this thing and eventually push it outside of this circle, because it's also like a sumo wrestling match to where you can not only just knock your opponent out, but also you can shove them out of this circle to also get a point on your side. So it's almost kind of like a karate match for a lot of people. There's a number of different kind of scenarios that you can do to take down this person. So we have Steve, who is kind of getting beaten down at first, but then eventually Steve knows how to kind of block into this thing to just kind of push it to where eventually it gets pushed out of bounds repetitiously. So a point goes to Steve. So we really have it to where Steve doesn't knock down this first enemy, but he is to basically just consistently push it out of bounds to get his points to win this match. So we immediately have it to where when Steve wins this match, the crowd goes crazy because they're like, oh my god, a human beating someone? We have both Weasel and Rogor who are kind of baffled by them seeing Steve out here fighting for Quinn, and they're like, "Wow, he's a fighter!" Like they must have just got anybody off the street. And so when Steve actually starts really impressing and wowing people, Weasel and Rogor is like, "Man, why didn't we snag this guy up? Like, man, we should have like seen the potential of this guy, but I guess like we were wrong. Like we should have forced this guy to fight for us." Or at least had him as a punching bag or something. So we have Steve who wins his first fight, and so we immediately have him go back to the to his home, and Marcus, who is Earth's former champion, gives Steve his medallion as a good luck charm to just be like, hey man, like you're like giving all these people a great amount of hope. Like I want to give you my medallion so that way, like it helps you figure out where you are going to head to be a champion like I was. And Steve is like, wow, I like this is a great gift that anyone has ever given me, but I can't accept it. Like if anything, I've only fought one fight and you fought like 50 fights to get this medallion. Like I cannot take this. But Steve eventually gets uh like kind of propped up over people's shoulders. She's like, yeah, he's our champion. He's gonna do it. Yeah. So we push on to have Steve winning fight after fight after fight. We have Steve going to a like a club or a lounge or something with Quinn to talk to her about her origin story. And so we have Quinn mentioning that Quinn's father used to do like fights and used to train people and used to be like the head of this whole thing. But eventually Rogor came in and strong armed him, and then like basically her father wasn't the same since, uh, and so Quinn ended up taking the mantle on to uh, try to beat Rogor at his game, and so to honor her father. So here's the one thing that I consistently start noticing in this movie. Every single time I look at Rogor or I look at Weasel in this movie, it honestly feels like their makeup is fairly inconsistent. Like it seems like at some point, like Rogor like looks like he has really gray makeup on, but then in like some kind of takes, it kind of feels like they had like his makeup was really running out in a lot of the scenes, to where you can kind of just tell like, man, you could tell that he's like barely having any kind of like shine and or silverness going on in his skin. That must be from a long shooting day where eventually like this guy was starting to lose his makeup. You can kind of see that on Weasel a little bit here and there too. Like there's some parts like around his neck or even maybe like in his nose that don't feel like every single time the shape is always the same. But like I think these people just tried their best to do what they could with makeup. Because consistently having to reapply this every single day, I'm sure was just an arduous process for a lot of these actors. Because like this was just a one shot deal, and I'm sure they probably couldn't like perfect the makeup all that well. So, and plus, like I think they had to adjust with like lighting in the movie to just obviously see that like, yeah, like this makeup is really wearing down. So how about we just position him in a darker spot so that way people can tell how bad the makeup is in this spot. Like I think that's what they were trying to adjust. So mood point. Moving on. So we see Steve eventually see Jade in this lounge. She is performing for all these people. Here's the thing that I honestly did not like about this character Jade. The song choices that they have her do are very goofy. Like if anything, the songs like just don't make any sense. Really, like there's nothing that I would say like, hey, they should have made a soundtrack of this movie after this based on this Jade character. Like that was kind of like the very disappointing thing of this movie is like, dude, you have a person that is supposed to be a singer of sorts, and like her music is like the weirdest thing. Like I get that it's like, well, it's future music, it has to be absurd or it has to be like weird. Like we also have like a uh like a stand-up comedian that is like some kind of alien that is to have jokes that not a lot of people get, but people laugh anyways. We have at the tail end of this stand-up's set, he is to mention everybody, hey, I hate your guts, and then everybody's laughing and like ha 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 ha, and so he walks off. So absurd. But anyways, so we have Steve who is desperately trying to get with Jade, and we eventually have Steve practicing with one of these monsters that is seemingly supposed to replicate what Horn is supposed to do, because eventually uh, Steve is to eventually make his way to contend with Horn, because eventually Horn is to arrive at this club that Steve and Quinn are at, and we have Shorty mentioning to Horn, it's like, well, yeah, he's gonna be the former champ. Because we have Armstrong, who is just like, he all of a sudden becomes a boxer, and all of a sudden he has tunnel vision, and he just wants to just start being a boxer and beat everyone and be champion because it's the right thing to do. And it's also to go up against Rogor and his weasel like ways. So we have both Steve and Horn almost kind of coming to blows in this club, but Rogor is like, dude, save it for the fight. Like, people want to see, people don't want to, like, I don't want to give anybody this fight for free kind of thing. And so we push on. So Steve eventually the next day is practicing and like doing some reps with some other like monster to eventually just kind of like help him try to figure out like how exactly to be prepared for the long game. And so we have Armstrong, who is looking out on people watching over him, and he is to see Jade. We have Armstrong, who is to eventually, after his practice is over, running to go and talk to Jade to mention, hey, like, do you want like a dinner or like something tonight, like get together and do something? And Jade is like, yeah, I don't know, like, you do have a big fight. And Steve is like, come on. And so we have Steve going with Jade. And so really, Steve is going and doing a ton of stuff that he probably should not do before like a big fight. Like, he is going and he is drinking alcohol a little bit, like celebrating, and eventually he is to go on and see Jade, and Jade is going to put makeup on, and Steve is mentioning like, well, I think you're perfectly beautiful. So we have Jade put on makeup, and Jade comes out there to eventually go and push Steve to have them both go into their bed and make love. We have eventually Jade, after this lovemaking session, where Jade was kind of hesitant about this at first, because, like, Steve, but your big match, and Armstrong is like, I'll be fine, let's just go at it. So we have Jade giving Armstrong one drink before he is to go and fight Horn. And so we have Jade, who is to poison Steve's drink. So we have Steve, who drinks this thing up. Like, dude, I would, like, if I was in a big fight with anybody, like, I would just be under lock and key, and, like, I would see nobody. I wouldn't trust anybody to make my own food. Like, I'm assuming someone would kill me off. So I would just be like, dude, I'm gonna get, like, a can of corn and just, and, like, yeah, that's what I'll do before my big fight. I don't want anybody to poison my or get food poisoning and me miss my big fight, because that's going to be a big payout. Plus, also, that's going to be like a championship fight. Like, it's a big deal. So, plus, if anything, like, huge amount of nerves would probably be going through Steve anyways. So we have Steve, who is stumbling his way back in to Quinn's locker room slash spot that she trains people. And so we have Quinn, who is now rushing the doctors in to check on Steve. And Steve had a huge amount of poison that evidently they can luckily go and work this out of his system within 15 minutes. And so we have the ring announcers that are kind of delaying Steve coming out. We have Horn, who is to go out there and be waiting for Steve. Is like, hey, what is he doing? Is he yellow? Like, oh, like, like, come on. Excuse me. So we have Steve, who is to have this kind of back and forth conversation with Quinn, and Quinn is like, "Do you want me to throw the towel in? Do you want me to should I like I'm asking you, Steve, because really like this is your body, this is your health." And Steve is like, "No, I will do it." Because eventually Quinn tells Steve that Jade is connected to Rogor, and Steve is like, "Oh my god, Rogor like told Jade to poison me, so that way like, oh my god, I want to fight Rogor." And Quinn is like, "No, go out there and fight Horn. Like, if anything, you beating Horn will beat Rogor in the same breath. So go out there, if you can, go and fight, take down Horn." So we have Weasel and we have Rogor coming up with their same old tricks. And so their plan of attack is, if Steve is to show up, that they are going to rig this match anyways. And so, because we have consistent times when monsters in this match have handicaps to make everything equal, as far as strength, as far as power, because a lot of times, of course, there's a bunch of aliens that are way stronger than a human, or vice versa. And so really putting these people into the fight will make them on equal grounds. It's just the fact that they just need skill to be able to get them through these matches. So we have Steve, who is to make it out there, and the announcer is thinking that they're going to postpone this match, but Steve comes out and they're like, "Well, I guess sorry for the delay, but let's get this match on." So we have Steve trying his best to beat Horn, but then eventually, after I think the second round, that's when the cheating comes in. That's eventually when Weasel takes Skull with him to adjust the handicapped thing for Horn, to where Horn is at absolutely full strength to go up against Steve. So we have Steve, who is starting to like see Horn as this like blurry mess, and Steve is trying to land these punches, but they're looking pretty awful, and Horn is just beating the living crap out of him. And so we have Shorty, who is to assume that there's something kind of funny going on, because Shorty realizes that Skull had mentioned that they are going to be trying to rig the arena fights before, and so Shorty is going up to the high spot of where the handicapped things are coming from, to try to see if anybody is rigging things. And so we have Shorty, who goes up there to realize both Weasel and Skull are trying to rig the handicap to work in Horn's favor. Shorty tries to fight off Weasel, and eventually starts to dismantle this this spot that is giving these people handicaps, to eventually have the handicaps being completely shut off whatsoever. And so we have it seemingly that Horn is very tired at this point of beating the living crap out of Steve. And so we have Steve, who is now at full strength because he wasn't able to use his full strength against Horn. And so we have Steve, who just starts laying it into Horn as much as possible, just beating the living crap out of him, to where Horn is to fall over like Steve had done in this match earlier to almost be counted out. And so Horn is to lay down, be counted out, and Steve is to win. And so we have Quinn and we have Steve kind of giving the boots to Rogor to be like, yeah, like we are like the champions now, like we are like the winners of all this, and like we are uh like now going to be like the headshots of this whole arena thing. And so with that said, I think I kind of covered a bulk of this movie. When Jade is to come running to Steve, because we have Jade who, while with Rogor, is consistently having feelings for Steve, where Jade is kind of second guessing a lot of things, and Rogar is like, "Dude, do you have feelings still for Steve, Jade? Like this is kind of like really like I like why would you have poisoned him then? Why would you almost have killed him then? Why?" So Jade comes running to Steve and is like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Steve, of what I did. Like I regret it." And so we have Quinn who punches Jade in the face, and Jade goes down like nobody's business. And so we eventually just push on to have Steve being carried out again because he's their champion, and that is the way that this movie just ends. So, with that said, I am going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.